We're going to be starting off on page 44 in the 18th book of Yisrayl, and this one is it's titled Tested and Proven. Okay, Tested and Proven. And this is chapter 5, and the title is Get Ready to Drink This Cup with Yeshua. It requires humility. Okay, get ready to drink this cup with Yeshua. It requires humility. And this sermon was given Donkeys 1, or it's the second Roman 2:17, 2018. And so first, before we get into the sermon itself, get into pastor's words, I wanted to look at a couple of words here. It says, get ready to drink this cup with Yeshua. And so I looked up this word drink, not in the Strong's, but just in the Funk and Wagner's dictionary. And it was the copyright in this particular dictionary was 1958. It was an older dictionary. And it says to drink means to take in eagerly through the senses or in the mind. Okay? To take in eagerly through the senses or in the mind. And of course it does mean vessel, cup, things like that. But to take in eagerly through the senses or the mind, and that's what the word drink means. And the word cup, figuratively, it means one's lot in life, or your portion. Okay, your portion in life. And so, thinking of a couple scriptures here, let's look over to Matthew chapter 23. Matthew 23. Drink this cup. Okay. No, actually, this is Matthew 20. In verse 22, Matthew chapter 20, verse 22. But Yeshua, let's go up to 21. He said let's go up to verse 20. It says, the caption reads, whoever will be the greatest among you, okay? Because there's a concept here that I wanted to remind you of here. So whoever will be the greatest among you. Verse 20, then the mother of Zabdia's sons came to him with her sons, worshipped before him, and wanted to make a request of him. He said to her, what do you want? She said to him, grant that these two sons of mine may be seated in your kingdom, one on your right hand and one on your left hand. But Yeshua answered and said, you do not know what you ask. Are you able to drink of the cup that I will drink from, and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with? They said to him, we are able. So he said to them, you will indeed drink from my cup and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with. But to sit at my right hand and on my left hand is not mine to give, but it is for those whom it is prepared by my Father. So the point here is like what he said to him in verse 21 and 22. He says, are you able to drink this cup that I'm going to drink, that I'm drinking from? And are you able to be baptized with the same baptism? And they said, yes. And he said, you indeed will drink from my cup. He didn't say, let's look at that again. You will indeed drink from my cup. He didn't say you're drinking from my cup, right? He said you will indeed drink from it, meaning, this is something you have to be prepared for. You have to be taught so that you can learn how to handle these things that I'm going through. The things that I'm teaching you are going to prepare you for your portion in life so that you can know how you fit into this plan of Yahweh. Okay, now let's look over to Matthew 23. Okay, Matthew 23. Let's start at verse 25 here. Because again, remember, he said, you will indeed drink from my cup. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you cleanse the outside of the cup and plate, but inside they are full of extortions, unlawful compulsions, blackmail, and incontinence, greed, unrestrained lack of contentment. You blind Pharisees, first cleanse the inside of the cup and plate, so that the outside of them may be clean also. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you are like whitewashed sepulchres, which indeed appear beautifully outwardly, but inwardly are full of dead men's bones and all uncleanness. In the same way, when you appear outwardly righteous to men, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and the breaking of Yahweh's law. So when you put those things together and think about this title here, get ready to drink this cup with Yeshua, it requires humility. And you look at what he just said to the Pharisees. Look at what's inside of you. Clean it inside of yourselves. You know, you're supposed to be vessels and containers for Yahweh Spirit Holy, but you're full of all of these unrighteous character traits. Okay, you're full of hypocrisy, you know, extortions, blackmail, you know, you're greedy. You know, you don't look out for the poor, the fatherless, and the widow. You know, all of these things are inside of the person. And he says, cleanse these things. Okay, and Yeshua said, you will indeed drink from my cup, but we first have to follow these teachings. And it requires humility to do so, to humble yourself to a teacher. Okay, so look at verse 2 here. This is in the sermon on page 44. Okay, that should get us ready to hear what Pastor's trying to prepare us for here. Isn't it strange that the world isn't exactly like let me see here. Isn't it strange that the world is exactly like Yahweh said it would be in this generation? Quite a coincidence, huh? Praise Yahweh. And he's talking about all of the death, the murders, the abortions, all of these different things that we see in the world today. Okay, the confusion. And then he goes on and let's read. Excuse me. It says, I was just told by the great Kohan Benjamin that today's date in Greek 112, the first day of the 12th moon, if you look it up in Strong's, in the Greek, it means godless. Did you get that? Godless, without God. Praise Yahweh. I told you this calendar is going to have a lasting effect on people. And he says, beautiful. And he goes on and he talks about the calendar a little bit. But look at verse 5. Okay, verse 5. And this will kind of tie in what he said in verse 2, when he said that Yahweh, the world is in the same or is in the exact state that Yahweh said that it would be. And this is why. Right here in the middle of it, it says that the worldly calendars were invented to take Yahweh out of the picture. Okay, the worldly calendars were created to take Yahweh out of the picture so that you would know when to meet with Yahweh, you know, for the weekly Sabbaths or for the feast days. Okay, so if you're not meeting with Yahweh, then you're not receiving the instructions that's necessary to even partake in the cup, to drink the cup that Yeshua is drinking from. Okay, so if you don't know when to meet with Yahweh, then you're not going to get your instructions. He tells you in Exodus 12, verse 2, this moon will be the beginning of the moons to you. That's the one with the green ears. That starts your new year. That's what we're going to go by, and that's what the sacred calendar is made to show. We'll have the first moon, and then we'll go by citing every moon. So you see how serious Pastor is about making sure we do everything the way that Yahweh says to do, as it is written. Okay, so this should be proof to you. Okay, it should add more proof to you of how, you know, we should be able to believe and trust into the one sent, because everything that he's saying, you can go back and find these things written in the scriptures. Okay, he's not just sitting in some, you know, closet or something just trying to come up with some stuff, you know, to make money. Okay, he's actually showing us what's written in the scripture so that we can make better choices in our lives to be a part of Yahweh's great work. And then you can go back and read what he taught you. Isn't that amazing? You don't, he could tell you something, you can go back and actually read it in the scriptures. Okay? Unlike the preachers, they'll tell you something like, where is that at? You know, you'll be searching the scriptures for them. And then you go, hey, where's that in the Bible? Oh, it's one of those proverbs that Solomon didn't write down. Or it's in the book of Maccabees or whatever other book that's not actually in the Bible or something like that. You know? But they got all of these interpretations and things like that, their own wise sayings, but they don't teach what the scriptures teach. Okay, remember Isaiah 8:20. So let's continue reading here. Let's look at verse 6. They tried to figure out calendars where they wouldn't have to come before Yahweh and look for the new moon. You're told to do so in Isaiah 65, verse 22. It says that this is going to be forever. And remember, it says from new moon to new moon, right? From feast to feast, year after year, forever. Okay, does that sound like it's going to stop or what? No, forever means forever. It means continuously. It's never going to end. But yet, you know, the teachings are that it came to an end, that we don't have to do those things anymore. You know, it's amazing if people just open up their scriptures and read. But we know it's a little bit more complicated than that. You know, like Yeshua said, no one can come to him unless drawn by Yahweh. Okay, no one can come to the house of Yahweh unless Yahweh draws them. So we can preach till we're blue in the face. You know, unless Yahweh's drawing them here, there's nothing that we can do as individuals except continue to be examples and prepare ourselves to be ready when Yahweh does bring them here. Because eventually all nations will do what? They'll flow to the house of Yahweh, right? Whether they're here now or not doesn't matter. We're getting ready because they're going to come. Okay, they have to have teachers set up for them. And that's why it's important to be here preparing for this great work. It's so important to prepare for this great work, man. So here in verse 7, it says, let me see. What I want you to see is where we're getting close to Yeshua's memorial. We really need to spend some time studying this and correcting ourselves and overcoming. We need to get our minds off the world totally off worldly things. And this has been on my mind a lot also. Okay, really trying to separate from the world. And it's very difficult the way that the world is set up today, because there's a lot of things that we still need from the world. Okay, we're still dependent on certain things from the world, our interaction with the world. But he says off worldly things. That doesn't mean we have to partake in everything that the world has to offer. You know what I mean? It should be business, and that's pretty much it. You know, getting the things that we need, and that's that. But interacting and mingling and things like that, we need to really, start separating ourselves. You know, the scriptures, it's a scripture, it's in Matthew 6:24. And again, this is something I've just been thinking about, because I like to study. And when I don't really get to study, it bothers me. And I know what those issues are. And it's not like I'm seeking after riches or anything like that, but it's so difficult, just to take care of your daily needs. And I think these are tests that Yahweh allows us to go through so that we can realize that no matter what we do, if we're not putting our trust in him and doing the things that he requires, then we're always going to be lacking. Remember, he who seeks after silver is going to be satisfied and blessed throughout all of eternity, right? Yeah, what? No, he who seeks after silver will never be satisfied, right? So when does it end? At what point do we find contentment and satisfaction? And this is why, one of the reasons why the scripture says, find your joy where? In Yahweh. Find your joy in Yahweh, because the system is set up to where, if you get rich, it comes with a lot of curses. If you seek after, the riches, it comes with a bunch of curses. If your mind isn't 100% focused on becoming like Yahweh, you're just going to be miserable. Okay, you're going to be miserable. And these are some of the lessons. So Matthew 6:24 says, no one can be a slave of two owners, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be loyal to one and despise the other. You cannot be a servant of both Yahweh and riches. Okay? This is the scriptures. You can't be a servant of both Yahweh and of riches. Okay? So Yahweh's given us an opportunity to make a choice. Okay? And let's see, are we in that? Yep. Okay, so look at verse 33. But seek you first the kingdom of Yahweh and his righteousness, and all these things will be added. And then it says, therefore, don't anxiously worry about tomorrow, what tomorrow may hold, for tomorrow will have its own worries. Okay, each day has its own troubles. So, we've been brought up, to seek after riches. Okay, it's a part of our culture. It's a part of how we've been brought up. Okay, and so the scriptures, as you see, says something totally different. It says, look, don't worry about those things. Yahweh knows what you need. Okay, even though you think you might need, a bunch of food because your belly's on E, Yahweh's like, no, you can be hungry. This is to humble you so that you can know that man doesn't live by what? Bread alone, but by the every word of Yahweh, the every word that proceeds out of Yahweh's mouth. So what if we go a little hungry? I myself, I don't like being hungry. It's not a satisfying thing, But even in Yahweh's law, he allows us to go hungry at least for one day a year, right? One day a year on the Day of Atonement, he says, look, afflict yourself so that you can be mindful of the blessings and the things that I provide. And without me, you wouldn't have anything. This is how you would feel every single day. You would be dying every single day if it wasn't for me. So think about that. Okay, and that's what the Day of Atonement is about, reflecting and thinking about that. Okay, and this is what Pastor's setting us up for, getting ready to drink this cup with Yeshua. It requires humility. Okay, afflicting your souls and thinking about what is your role here. Okay, why have you been created? Why have you been called to Yahweh's house? Okay, so that you can have a full belly and a bed of roses? Absolutely not. We're called to this affliction so that we can become perfect just like Yeshua became perfect through sufferings, through tests and trials, through tribulation. Okay, it's actually a gift from Yahweh if you want to look at it like that. Okay, the testing and trying, these are gifts from Yahweh. Okay, because these are the things that's going to refine our character. Okay, which is a blessing to us. If Yahweh didn't test and prove us, that's the title of the book, right? Tested and proven. Okay, we have to go through these testing and trials for that. And then when we are proven before Father Yahweh, then what's after that? peace, joy, and abundant living, right? Showing other people how to have peace, joy, and abundant living. There's nothing better than that. We have an opportunity to be teachers, in the future, in the world to come. Okay? So look at verse 8 and 9 here. Pastor's talking about how this pride, let's see here, pride is the most difficult of all things in our lives today, especially today. Martin Luther King Jr., he did a lot of damage in promoting the word proud. People didn't realize what he was doing. I don't think he did himself. People from that time period, all nationalities have got it put in their minds that they need to be proud. Stand up proud and be a proud people. Think of yourself most highly. Okay, this has been passed down from generation to generation. Okay, being proud. Okay, stand up for yourself, defend yourself. Don't let anybody, put you down and things like that. Okay, and Yeshua had a completely different attitude. Yeshua humbled himself. He submitted to the governing authorities. Okay, he wasn't worried about, standing up for himself. He said, Yahweh is my defense. Isn't that what the scripture says? Let Yahweh be your defense. So if you're defending yourself, then how are you letting Yahweh do his job? So that's usurping authority. Okay, it's Yahweh's job to defend you. Okay, you don't have to defend yourselves. Okay, Yahweh will defend you. But this is a teaching. Okay, this is their teaching. Be a proud people. The motivational speakers do this too. Zig Ziglar was one of them that promoted this proudness and that you're above everyone else in the world. That's God worship. You're not above. You're a person. You're a created being, as Yahweh said. He created you. Doesn't that scripture, just listen to that right there, doesn't that remind you of other scriptures? You're a created being. Who did he say that to? Right, exactly. He said it to Satan. She said, I am a God. He said, no, you're but a created being. Okay, and you're gonna be brought down to Sheol, the grave, when Yahweh judges her. She is a created being, but she said in her heart, I will be like a God. I will be like the Most High. Right? That was her attitude. I'm proud. No, you're going to die. Okay, that attitude leads to death, and this is what Pastor wants us to understand. This is what Yahweh wants us to understand. It takes humility to drink this cup with Yeshua. It says here, excuse me, it says here, that puts him above you, talking about Yahweh. He's our Father. He also has the most wisdom of any being in the universe. He has the wisdom that he offers to mankind. He offers it to us if we will humble ourselves as little children. Okay? If we will humble ourselves as little children and sit at the feet of the priest who teaches peace. Okay? This is part of the work of Yahweh, that we sit at his feet and learn these things. And in verse 10, it says humility. Humility is what you want. It's a quality, a state of mind of being, a state of mind and heart of being humble to the work that Yahweh himself inspired his prophets to write about. It's been asked many times, how do you know that the Bible is not a fairy tale? So how do you know that the Bible is not a fairy tale? Fulfilled prophecies, right? Fulfilled prophecies, right? And this is what he says here. He says, fairy tales can't foretell the future. In these prophets' writings, the future is foretold, like the nuclear bomb that can darken the sun and destroy the earth was foretold to be in this generation. And remember, Moshe wrote about these things, right? Do I got to give y'all the cricket sound? Come on, man. There you go. Deuteronomy 28, right? Deuteronomy 28. All right, when he was talking about the nuclear war, your rain will be powder and dust and things like that. Okay, he talks about the holes. He talks about the darkening of the sun. All of these things in Deuteronomy 28, before they even had like a firecracker, right? But he was inspired to write about these things. These things are amazing, man, when you really meditate on the word of Yahweh. Okay, like Pastor said, you can't read it like a funny book. You have to sit back and actually look at it, read it, and just soak it in. Drink it. All right, eat this book. Eat this book. Looking at verse 12, Pastor talks about Eob, or Yeshub is his name. And he lived in the time period of the Levitical priesthood. Well, he was a product of it. Okay, he was a product of the Levitical priesthood. He was held up by Yahweh to be one who actually qualified for receiving the promise. He qualified by keeping Yahweh's laws, statutes, and judgments. He qualified for this place in Yahweh's kingdom. He won't receive it without us, and that was also foretold in what book? They won't receive the promise without us. The book of Hebrews, praise Yahweh. I got to test you, man. I got to throw that out there. All right? I think I only hear one voice, though. Praise Yahweh. It's in the book of Hebrews, they without us will not be made perfect because we're the finishing work, right? And when they're resurrected, we'll be able to tell them about all of these other things. They don't have the books of Israel in their mind, okay? They only have, like Isaiah only has the books before him, okay? They don't have, like, the prophets of old don't have the writings of volume 2. Daniel didn't have volume 2, okay? A lot of the other men didn't have revelations. Okay, we have all of that information plus everything that we have today, and so we're going to have to bring them up to speed. Okay, so they're not going to be made perfect without these teachings, the completion of this great work. Okay, so get that in your minds, or bring it back to the forefronts of your minds, because this isn't new. These aren't new teachings. So continuing on here, let's look at verse 14. It says, "You're a fool," Yeshua said, "if you don't believe every word that Yahweh's prophets have spoken. You don't live," he said, "except by the every word that Yahweh's prophets have spoken." And I like the way he wrote, like how he said that right there. Okay, he says, you don't live except by the every word of Yahweh. Okay, so if you're not living by the every word of Yahweh, you're not living. So if you're not living, what are you doing? You're dying. Okay, man does not live by bread alone, but by the every word of Yahweh. You don't live unless you're living by the every word of Yahweh. You're dying. The people in the world are dying. Okay, and we're suffering right now, but we're changing that, because when we change our hearts and our minds, we're qualifying, just like we read about Yeshua here, or Eob. We're qualifying for life and for positions in Yahweh's kingdom. Okay, but like Yeshua said, indeed you will drink this cup. You know, we're cleansing the inside of the cup right now, right? We're cleansing the inside of the cup. Right now we're still filled with, some things that we have to work on. Nothing like what it says here, hypocrisy and blackmail and extortions and all of that garbage, But there's little things that we have to get rid of, okay? So we're cleansing the inside of the cup so we can qualify to be partakers in this great work with our high priest Yeshua, along with Pastor and Father Yahweh himself. So continuing on here, verse 15, "I know a lot of people get angry with me for bringing this out. I know I'm different. I know that the house of Yahweh, there's nothing like it on earth." And, praise Yahweh for that. And Jacob in Genesis realized that too. Remember? He said, man, this is none other than the Catholic Church that sits on the 7 hills of Rome. There is none. Hold up. That's not what it says. What is it? This is none other than what? This is none other than the house of Yahweh, right? None other than the house of Yahweh. Man, how excited does that make you, knowing that you're in the place that Yahweh established that's going to get you eternal life? Everything that you hope for and imagine in your whole life, Yahweh is offering it to you right here at his house. Okay, so you have the same, mindset as Jacob when he said, man, this is none other than the house of Yahweh. This is the gateway, the entranceway to the kingdom of Yahweh. You're here, man. There's none like it. And this is what Pastor said right here. He said, let me see. There's nothing like it on earth. We're it. But I'm telling you, it's the best. Yes, I want you all to make it. If I see you going wrong and I don't correct you, it's my fault. If I do, excuse me. If I do correct you and you want to continue to go to the path of burning, that's your choice. Okay, that's your choice. But guess what? Correction is what? It's love. It's true love. Okay, remember in the book of Hebrews, it says that, if you're corrected, it's because your father loves you. But if you're not corrected, you're what? Bastards, right? Without a father corrects and guides his family. Okay, that's what a father does. He corrects and guides his family and makes sure that we have all of the information that we need to make right choices. But if we choose not to listen to our father, that's our choice. And like it says up here, we're fools if we do that. Okay, we're fools if we don't listen to the wisdom and the guidance of our Father. And Pastor represents the supreme ruler of all the earth, Father Yahweh himself. Okay, and Pastor, is a father to us. He guides us and leads us in the way of Yahweh. He guides us and leads us in the way of Yahweh. Without him, I can guarantee you at least half of us wouldn't be alive. I don't want to say guarantee, but it's more, let me just put it like this. More than likely, a lot of us wouldn't be alive. Okay, let me put it like that. Because I can't see the future, so I don't really can't really guarantee that. But it would be really difficult to have life the way that we were living, you know, in the path that we were on. It would be hard to, I know it was the areas that I grew up in, and I've talked to a lot of the men, you know, we've been through a lot of things. You know, we've come out of the world. The world is a dangerous place, okay, except a certain part in Ohio, but I'm just going to leave that alone right now. All right, but anyway, let's see here. Let me go to verse, great day. All right, let me jump down here. Verse 16, humility, a state of mind. This is shown in the scriptures, a state of mind and heart. You've got to love Yahweh with all your mind and with all your heart, being humble to the work. And Yeshua said that this is the work that you do what, man? Believe into the one sent. Okay, that's the work. And then whatever he teaches you, comply, be obedient, humble yourselves to those teachings. Okay, knowing that those teachings are going to get you everything that you desire and more. Because remember, again, it hasn't entered into the mind of man what Yahweh has in store for those who love him. So all you have to do is believe what's written, believe into the work, and believe into the one sent, and get the job done. Change yourselves, cleanse the inside of the cup. Okay, look at verse 17 here. It says, seek first the kingdom of Yahweh and his righteousness. Seek that first. It's got to be first in your life. It's not after you get back from Walmart playing around in the store where you never should have been in the first place. Seek it first. You got all the books to do so at his house, at his work, where his work is done. That should be plain enough. So let's look at that again here. He said, don't seek the kingdom after you get back from Walmart where you shouldn't have been in the first place. You know, how many, don't raise your hands or anything, but think to yourselves, how many people are, well, Pastor, we still need to go to the store. We still need to get stuff. You know, if those were your thoughts, you know, really check yourself, okay? Really check yourself because, you know, Pastor knows that we need things. You know, we're still like somewhat linked to the world to a certain degree. You know, he knows that. But think about what he said here. He said, you never should have been at Walmart in the first place. But we need stuff. No. Did Moshe go to Walmart to get what he needed? Did Solomon go to Walmart to get what he needed? No. Yahweh's people were self-sufficient. We're not there yet. Okay? We don't need to, we should have never been at Walmart in the first place. Did Adam go to Walmart? Abel? No. Yahweh provided for them. Yahweh's house provides for his people. Okay, and that's the work. We need to get to the point where, you know, all of our needs are taken care of by the house of Yahweh. And as long as we're not putting ourselves into this work and building Yahweh's house, then we're going to be off into these places like Walmart, you know, where people aren't, you know, dressed appropriately, not conducting themselves appropriately, you know, not keeping the health laws and things like that, where you can go and touch a shopping cart and just watch your hand just wither right then and there because of the spreading of sickness and disease. I've never seen that occur, but this is the world that we're in, though. And Pastor said we should have never been there in the first place, and he's right. We should never have to go to Walmart because we should be a people that's supported completely by Yahweh himself, right? But we have to get that work done, and this is what we're training for, men, okay, so that all of our needs are met by the house of Yahweh. But that means it takes commitment on our part, humility, humbling ourselves, trusting and believing into the one sent. And if we can't do that, then we're going to continue to expose ourselves to the dangers that are in this world. And I'm not trying to scare you. You know, I mean, we shouldn't be scared. We should be aware, okay? Because remember, you know, there's this true love of Yahweh, this knowledge of Yahweh casts out all fear. So we need to be making educated decisions, okay? We need to be basing our choices on the information that comes from the teachings that are in the scriptures, believing in everything that's written here, okay? Believing into the witness in all of these teachings. And so, again, you know, I want to look at verse 17 again. Seek first the kingdom of Yahweh and his righteousness. Seek that first. It's got to be first in your life. And I wanted to just tie that in with what we read earlier, where it says we need to get, this is verse 7, we need to get our minds off of worldly things, totally off worldly things, okay? And think about what we read again in Matthew 6, I think it was 6:24, not serving two owners. Okay, committing ourselves to Yahweh, getting our minds off the things that the world has to offer, you know, and building Yahweh's house, man. Okay, because it's going to be difficult to get your minds on Yahweh, studying Yahweh's way when we're still focused on trying to build up our own homes. Okay, the only house that we should be building up is not only the physical house of Yahweh, but yourselves, okay, which is also a physical house of Yahweh. so that the Spirit of Yahweh can dwell in you. May Yahweh bless your understanding. If you'll all please stand, I'll turn it over to the great Kohan, Michael Hawkins. Praise God.
Shalom, men. Please be seated. The guy was talking about those 7 hills. I don't see no 7 hills. I just see a big, huge mountain here, right? Praise Yahweh. All right. Let's see. Now, he was talking about, the last thing he said was to seek Yahweh first. Let's look at Yeshua's example, because Yeshua, as a child here, he gives a really great example. Look at verse 20 here. It says in Luke 2:41, now every year his parents went up to Jerusalem for the feast of Passover. Okay, so every year they went up to do this. Now verse 21 says, now every year his parents went up to Jerusalem for the feast of Passover. Okay, so he was keeping this feast according to the law. As Moshe said, this is the moon, the beginning of the moons, Yahweh told him. The first moon, it sets all the feasts. Okay. And then, verse 23, this is Luke 2:43. It says, well, once when he was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem for the feast as usual. So this was a normal thing that they always did, okay? They always went up to the feast year by year because they kept the laws of Yahweh. Now, he was 12 years old. And Pastor says, you got that? He was 12 years old. And verse 43, and when the feast days were over, that is, when the feast is ended, then they left. But the boy, meaning Yeshua, remained behind in Jerusalem. However, Yosef and his mother did not know of it. In verse 44, but then they were thinking that he was in a traveling company, and they had gone, after they had gone a whole day's journey, then they searched for him among the relatives and friends because they didn't see him, right? They didn't know where he was at, so they started looking for him. And as it says, but when they did not find him, then they turned back to Jerusalem seeking after him, because then they realized, okay, he's not here among us. Now you got to remember, there was large groups would gather together and travel together in this manner, especially if they had, they had to bring animals and so forth with them for tithe and offerings and so forth. So this is what he's talking about. He said, when he thought about they might have been among the relatives and the friends, this was a big, huge traveling company. It could have been hundreds of people, okay? And it could have been hundreds of children playing around with them, And so he got this huge, massive company traveling, and so they didn't think anything of it. They thought he'd probably be somewhere around there, But when they started looking for him, then they realized that he wasn't around. So finally, after 3 days, and Pastor said after 3 days, get that? They searched for 3 days, and this is very important for you to understand. And probably knowing mothers, there was a frantic and sleepless searching. You can imagine, okay, because they were searching for Yeshua. And you got to get that in your mind, or you won't even understand what he's trying to show you here. But they searched frantically for him for 3 whole days. And everybody knows how a mother is, And so you can imagine she must have been really, concerned about him. So finally, it says in verse 47, finally after 3 days, they found him in the sacred precincts, sitting in the midst of the doctors. And these, of course, were the teachers of the laws. And they were listening to him, and they were asking questions, okay? And it says, all who heard him were astonished at his understanding. Because all who hear, when they were astonished because of the fact that he's a 12-year-old boy, and he was talking and asking them questions and answering their questions and so forth as they would ask him certain things. It's kind of like reminds you of how Pastor was. Remember when he was very young and he talked to his brother-in-law, and his brother-in-law got so frustrated he threw his Bible down, right, and was ready to stomp on him and so forth, because he had that knowledge and understanding, because he searched the scriptures. And this is the same way that Yeshua was, and this is what we were talking about earlier, is you've got to seek the kingdom of Yahweh first in that manner. So they marveled at the things that he had brought forth. Now in verse 47, it says, all who heard him were astonished at his understanding and answers. Verse 48, when they saw him, of course the parents, okay, they were amazed. And his mother said to him, son, why have you done this to us? Behold, your father and I have searched for you in great distress. So you can see there, great distress. And of course, anybody would be that way if it was their child too, right? And he said to them, why is it that you search for me? Now get that question there. He says, why didn't you know, mother and father? Why didn't you know where I was? You know me like a book. You raised me. You taught me. You know my job. Where else would I be except a sacred precinct learning? You see that? That is what was on Yeshua's mind. And yes, he thought his parents would know his mind wasn't on the world, and it was completely on learning to do the business of Yahweh, to learn all the things, all the This is why when Yeshua grew up, he knew when he was a Messiah, because he knew every prophecy concerning the Messiah, and he fulfilled them all. And that's why whenever he went up to Yachanan to get baptized, remember, he says, no. Yachanan said, you're the one that should be baptizing me. And he says, no, you must baptize me in order to fulfill all righteousness, right? And so he was always looking to do what he could to fulfill the law of Yahweh and to fulfill the prophecies that had to do with him. He knew what he had to do. So you see here that he was doing the business of Yahweh. Business, and that's what it's called. It's a work. He says, I don't think he was sarcastic, but I know he was pointing something out to them. Very, very important, and they realized that. So he says, do you not know? Do you not know, after these 12 years? You can imagine, him speaking almost like it as a grown-up, to get their attention to make this point, but at the same time, he was very respectful. Yeshua was very, very obedient to them. He said, do you not know that I must be about my Father's business? My Father's business. Now, I'm going to show you something here. This is from the... wow. Somebody didn't adjust that, did they? This is from the expositors. Can y'all see that? Okay, this is from the expositor's Greek Testament in Luke 2:49. He says here, I must be about my Father's business. It says, in the Greek it shows it, and it says, I must be about in the things of my Father. And the authorized version says, about my Father's business. Therefore, in the place are the house of my Father, as the Revised Version says. So he says the former may be the verbal translation, but the latter is the real meaning, okay? So he was saying, I've got to be here at the house of Yahweh. This is my life. This is what I'm doing, my Father's business, okay? He says, don't you know that? Surely you realize that this is where I would be. So he was saying to his mother and daddy here, he says, you should have known where I was. That's where I come and study every feast in the sacred precincts. And when he would go, I'm sure they probably had a hard time dragging away from that. Come on, Yahshua, you got to go to bed, man. You got to go to bed. Come on. And of course, he would listen to him and be obedient and stuff, but he loved to go and soak up all of the learning that he could. So he says, this is where I come and study every feast in the sacred precincts. Why would I be playing around? My job is to learn about and to be able to perform my Father's business. Why would I be playing around? Joseph Benson, in his commentary, I still need to go out, don't I? He says, they who saw him were amazed, namely not his parents only, or chiefly, but others. In the sense Dr. Campbell understands it as a suiting better the scope of the passage of his parents says, it might be said to have had reason of surprise or even amazement when they discovered that he was not in their company, but surely to them at least, there was nothing peculiarly surprising in finding that it was not amusing himself with boys. Okay, like he wasn't just playing around and goofing around, but he was in the temple of the house of Yahweh among the doctors, discoursing on the most important subjects. And he says, I say justly to them that who knew whence he was, that there was less ground of amazement at the wisdom and understanding displayed in his answers than in any other human being. And that's what they were totally amazed of. He's a 12-year-old boy, and he had all this knowledge and understanding of the laws, You know, something that most children his age wouldn't even know. You know, but he studied and he put the kingdom of Yahweh first. And that's why he set the perfect example for us. So Pastor says, you see all these things that probably went on between them. He says, maybe they did, maybe it was just condensed. He says, it's certainly there was for you to see that Yeshua was sincere about his Father's business. And that's what he trained for. Every time he went to Jerusalem and got the opportunity to go before the priests and ask them questions and also answer questions for them. Can you drink that cup? You can't drink that cup right there and have the world in your mind. It just doesn't work. You've got to get your mind off of this world. Don't try to work until the last minute and rush here to the house of Yahweh. It doesn't work. You know, and that's the reason why we have the preparation day. Okay? We have the preparation day for that reason, is to get prepared for the Sabbath day, to take time to get prepared. The word preparation, according to Thayer's Greek English lexicon, it means a making ready or preparation. It also means to equip, okay? And that which is prepared. Now, the word equip is interesting because the word equip actually refers to the fact of equipping men or troops of war, okay, with all of the apparatus that is needed, such as the food and the tents and all of the armor and so forth. But, equip for war. And it makes you think of Ephesians 6, verses 11 through 17, where it talks about put on the whole armor of Yahweh, right? Put on the whole armor, because we don't wrestle against flesh and blood only. We wrestle against the world of the spiritual darkness that's out there. And so he says, put on the whole armor of Yahweh so that you can stand, okay, and be ready. But he says, with the preparation of the message of peace, okay? And that's what you have to be prepared with. We have to prepare our hearts and prepare our minds, because we're fighting the battle, because Satan doesn't want us to keep the Sabbath to begin with. She'll try anything that she can to get our minds off of the Sabbath, But that's why you've got to be prepared in your mind and in your heart and be ready to keep the Sabbath day. So notice he talks further here. He says, in the first place, he says, if you think about how far these people traveled and how to travel to keep the feast, you can see a one day's journey bringing animals. It's a pretty daunting task, really. You have to take care of all of those animals and keep them in line and get them to continue to travel with you. And try to get that in your mind. He says, I'm talking about an example set for you. You've got to be the best. You've got to be like Yeshua. He set a perfect example, and he says to be perfect. And the apostles told us the same thing. Okay, the apostles said the same thing. Now, he says, not only, Yeshua set a perfect example here. He says, but not only here, but throughout his whole life. His whole life was a perfect example of how we should live. He was willing to die. He was willing to die, notice. And he says, how close are you to that cup that he drank? How close are you to that cup that he drank? What was he talking about? What is a cup? Well, the cup itself that's how we prove ourselves to Yahweh. We prove to Yahweh that we want to do his will. Okay? Now, it says in Psalm 16, verse 5, Yahweh is our portion, our inheritance, the portion of our cup. You maintain our lot. In Psalm 116, verses 13 to 14, he says, we will take the cup of salvation and we will call upon the name of Yahweh. We will pay our vows to you now in the presence of all your people, O Yahweh. So you can see the cup, okay, taking the cup and doing the will of Yahweh. And that's what Yeshua said in Matthew 26:39. Remember, he went out in the garden with his disciples, and he says he went a little further, he fell on his face and prayed, saying, Oh, my Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. Okay? So when he says here, can you drink the cup of Yeshua? Okay? Can your willpower be strong like Yeshua? Can you do the will of Yahweh? Will you prove yourself worthy to Yahweh? Now he says, notice what he did. Now he was 12 years old. Now get that in your mind, he says again. He was 12 years old. I want you to read this for yourself, he says. Are you too proud to get yourself down to this point, this right here? He said, well, the world is. And the whole reason for changing the calendar was so that they wouldn't have to obey Yahweh. okay? They wouldn't have to obey Yahweh. Remember, they changed the calendar. They changed the seventh-day Sabbath, okay, which is, remember, the Sabbath is the mark of Yahweh. It shows that you belong to Yahweh. They changed the seventh-day Sabbath to the first day, or Sunday, the day of the sun god, okay? And, of course, remember, Sunday and all the worldly holidays and so forth, that's the mark of the beast. So they changed Yahweh's calendar so they wouldn't have to obey Yahweh. Instead, they obeyed Satan. Remember Romans 6:16, do you not know to whom you yield yourself as servants, those whom you serve, okay, to obey? His servants are to whom you obey. Whoever you obey, you're the servant of that person, which leads to death, right? It says sin, whether it's of sin which leads to death, which means following the gods, right, in observing honor to the sun god, or of obedience, which leads to righteousness, and keeping the laws of Yahweh, which are in honor to Yahweh, okay? So he says, well, they don't have to obey Yahweh anyway. They don't have to get eternal life. No one does. You know, it's a choice. It's a choice even to us. He says they don't have to accept this gift from Yahweh. More than that, they wanted to deceive the whole world. And this is what was put into their minds. They changed the calendar. Now, in the next, actually, I'm going to read something real quick here. In the very next chapter, chapter 6, the pastor said the sacred calendar is a must. For the people who want salvation, it's a must. They didn't just give these names to the weekdays to give them names. That's not what was behind it. It was to take the authority away from Yahweh. Take the name totally out of your minds and cause you to forget the name of Yahweh. That's why they did this. Remember, Genesis 1 tells you in the very beginning, everything in there says it was right. Right? The whole thing says it was right. So, everything was right. Everything that he did. And everything was to give honor and glory to him. Now, he says, continues on, Pastor says, the Gregorian calendar is nothing but a bunch of deceit to get people to use the names of gods every day in their lives. It's very difficult to get them out. He says, every time I deal with the world and I have to write the date from the Gregorian calendar, it makes me irritated. And it does, you know. It's just, I don't like the I don't like the Roman date. I hate to even put it down, you know. We refer to everything, even on the sermons and so forth, according to Yahweh's sacred calendar, because that's Yahweh's way, you know. And we will put in parentheses the Roman date so people might know it. But if you ask me what Roman date is, I don't know. I'll look at my watch and see, you know. What time? I don't know. I'll take out my phone. Okay, that is it. Okay. But I can't stand using it anymore. I like Yahweh's calendar. It's so simple. Just so extremely simple. It's right there, you know. Okay, so he went back with him to Nazareth, okay, and he was subject. Now he says, did you notice that? He says, wow, a 12-year-old boy who was subject. You know, he says, you know what that means? He was obedient. And the scriptures say, rather, in one of the Ten Commandments, it says, honor your father and mother. This is one way you honor your father and mother, unless, of course, they want you to God worship, right? Then you can say the best way to honor them then is to say, this is God worship, mother. This is God worship, father. I don't want any part of it. But these people did not teach God worship, you know. His parents didn't teach God's worship. They taught Yahweh worship. They were keeping the feast like Yahweh told them to do, according to the new moon of green ears. Now, then the Catholic priests, notice, the Coptic Catholics tried to stop the keeping of the feast. They finally sent Titus, the Roman general, to just destroy the temple and wipe out, they killed millions of people, the history tells you. He says you can read about that in history or you can read it in the newsletters. The Coptic Catholics were actually governing the temple at that time, and they had all the offices occupied. They were the ones with authority that had squeezed their way in and deceived their way to control that temple after Solomon died. Okay? Now, and you read about that in 1 Kings. Okay, 1 Kings 11 tells you, 1 Kings 11 verses 1 through 8, it says, however, Solomon loved many foreign women. Now, that was the problem right there, okay? He loved many foreign women. Besides the daughter of Pharaoh, he had women from the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, the Phoenicians, and the Hittites, from the very nations that Yahweh had commanded the children of Israel not to marry. Okay? and they must not marry you. Well, why? Well, he had warned them already. Yahweh already warned them why you don't want to marry these women. Or the women don't want to marry the men either. Because it says they will turn away your heart after their gods. And to these Solomon clung in love. Now he had 700 royal wives and 300 concubines. And it was his wives who turned away his heart. Now that was a literal force of 1,000 pagan-minded women in his government. Do you see how much damage that can do? And it did a whole lot of damage because this opened up the door. These were Coptic Catholics, these women, okay? And they began to take over. And it's the same, you see the same example in 1 Samuel 2:22. You remember with Eli? Eli was very old. And when they heard about his sons, they said, your son's going around, they're sleeping with all the women who served at the tabernacle. Well, these were not righteous women who, whores who slept around. These were the Coptic Catholic women who was getting in there, setting this up, so that eventually by the time it came around Solomon's time, and he had 1,000 of them there, man, they had it made, They've been getting in there, and once they were able to take over the kingdom itself, well, then they were able to take over the religion of Israel itself, and then take control of the temple. And by the time Yeshua came around, they had already had complete control. So it says, continuing in 1 Kings 11, verse 4, he says, when Solomon became old, his wives turned his heart after hinder gods, and his heart was not perfect with Yahweh his father, as the heart of his father David had been, okay? Because Solomon, it says Solomon went after Ashtoreth, the goddess of Phoenicians, and after Milcom, the god Moloch, the abomination of the Ammonites. Now, that's why he changed Yahweh's calendar in his mind, okay? He forgot Yahweh's way. He went after the gods. He set up the sacred pole, okay, and to be able to keep the feast by the equinox. And in his mind, he thought it was okay. He's still keeping the feast of Yahweh, But he used his pagan way of determining what the year was in the calendar, and he compromised. And he thought he could compromise with Yahweh's law, but he couldn't. And Solomon did evil in the eyes of Yahweh, and he did not completely follow Yahweh as David had done. He even built high places, okay, and he did the same thing for all his foreign wives, it says. So once the kingdom was taken control of, they managed to take over the worship of the entire congregation, of everybody's minds who would be weakened through these Catholics. And so he continues on here. Pastor says, they had control with the Roman army. If someone disagreed with them, they just simply arrested them and threw them in jail. If they argued with them, then of course they would take them and arrest them and bring them out and do whatever they wanted with them. But this is shown in Acts 4, chapters 4 through 10. And he says the Pharisees, who were Coptic Catholics, were in charge. Now, the word Pharisee is Greek 5330. And it says it's of a Hebrew origin. Okay, it's of the Hebrew origin, and it means, I'm going to show you this. It means a separatist, okay? All right, so the Pharisee, it's the Greek number 5330 of Hebrew origin, and it's the Hebrew number 6567. But notice it means separatist, okay? And it also means religious. So this is where the word Pharisee comes from. Now the 6567 means to separate, okay? To separate. To disperse, which is exactly what they did. They dispersed themselves out throughout all of Israel. And notice what it means by implication, to wound. Okay, to wound. Well, of course, that's what they did with the Roman army. They went out and did whatever they wanted. Now, Brown, Jarvis, and Briggs says the same word. Notice what it means here. It means to cause to break forth, to burst forth as a serpent's brood. Isn't that interesting? The dividing serpent, right? It also means dung, because that's about all that they were worth, Yahweh said, right? As a pile of dung. It means to rip open stomach and scatter the contents of. And that's exactly what they did, okay? They did that with the women. When they go in, and you can read this in First Kings, and they went in there and any of the pregnant women, they ripped open their stomachs and pulled out the babies and killed them. This is the great love that they held for one another. Well, that's the confusion that takes over whenever you want to go against Yahweh's laws. Okay, so, and then Pastor says they sent the scriptures to Egypt to be translated, and then they brought them back. They translated them to Latin in Egypt, and they brought them back, and of course they translated them to English. Well, they changed the calendar, he says, and there's no such word as calendar in the scriptures. Okay, Yahweh just tells you in the very beginning, in Genesis 1, the sun and the moon will be for days and years and moons and so forth. That's how you keep time, okay? And then he says, of course, they want to say that they came up with these different calendars because they weren't accurate, okay? But the only thing that's inaccurate is their own clocks, because the clock in heaven never loses time, okay? And it never gains time. It's perfect. But their time, their minutes, their hours, and so forth, it don't match, and so they don't know how to make a match. You know, and this is why they always, every so often, they have to adjust their atomic clocks by a millionth of a second, you know. And I'm sure you probably woke up feeling tired because you had lost a million of a second one morning when you woke up, right? You know, this is the utter stupidity they have, that they try and think that they have to get something like that taken care of, you know. But Yahweh's way is perfect. It's not like that. So he says, well, the sun and the moon are inconsistent. That's what they want you to say. They want to say that it's inconsistent, you can't rely upon it, and this is why they figure out that you can have this many moons and days and so forth to fit in with the solar year and all this kind of stuff to make it all match up. But they're not. They've been the same for 6,000 years, and we know it's never changed, okay? You remember Genesis 1, 17 through 18, Yahweh says he put up in the expanse of the sky, he put the sun and the moon. In verse 18, Genesis 1:18 says, to govern the day and the night and to separate light from darkness. And Yahweh saw that it was right. Well, if it was created right, then who of mankind can say that it was wrong? You know? So they challenge their own creator when they do this. And remember, Daniel 7:25 said that they would. Remember, they would think to change the times. They would think to change the feast days, okay? So they build themselves up and they think that they can go over this and actually, you know, take the place of Yahweh. And you can't. Yahweh is the wisest being in the universe, as we just read. He's the wisest being in the universe. So, you know, they fixed their own calendars so they wouldn't have to go before Yahweh, because with Yahweh's calendar, you have to appear before Yahweh in the place that Yahweh says is where he places his name, right? So you have to submit yourself to Yahweh in order to keep his laws, which are very simple. I mean, even a child can figure that out, okay? You look for the green ears, and you look for the moon. How hard is that? You know? Instead of trying to figure out to all of these, the minute seconds and so forth, you know, of what takes place. You know, they set all this stuff, you know, when Solomon sinned was with the sacred pole, putting up the sacred pole and finding the equinox. Today, you know, they don't even keep the equinox on the day that it's supposed to be. You know, if you write to the Naval Observatory, you find out that the actual vernal equinox is on March 17th. And then, you know, they keep the 21st, you know. And that keeps creeping up every so often and stuff. So it's like they themselves, they just go everything by tradition. They just throw things out there, you know. Well, it says that when he went back with him to Nazareth and he was subject to him, but his mother kept all these sayings in her heart. And it says, and this was great that she understood these things. She understood what he was saying. And Yeshua increased in wisdom, in age, and in honor with Yahweh and man. With honor with Yahweh and man, okay? And that is something that separated Yeshua from others because of his great love, his great desire and knowledge and understanding he had of the Scriptures. And that's why he set the example for us at a very young age. So notice what he says here further down. He says, start thinking about all these things. He's talking about feast time. He says the feast is coming up. Start thinking about getting the campgrounds ready and the food ready for the feast. Get your own self ready, because you're going to be using, and the feast is coming up, right? Get your own self ready, because we're going to be using you in teaching. You'll be teaching to get the sanctuary ready and getting the people prepared to drink of this cup of Yeshua. Now, this cup of Yeshua is easy. Remember in Matthew 11:30, he says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Follow me. And so we've got to do that. So he says, go to the place that Yahweh says to go, where he prophesied it in prophecy. And that's why you must come here to Abel to keep the feast of Yahweh. You try and keep a feast anywhere else, it's not Yahweh's feast. It has to be kept in the place that he says. So the same prophets also said that the nuclear bomb was going to be here in the generation that they told you where Yahweh's house is going to be, how it would be established, and the teachers who would be there to teach. Now, Yeshua is one. Yeshua who wants you to drink this cup with him. You remember what his cup was? His cup is your cup, okay? Is to do the will of Yahweh, okay? To do his will. And that's the same that Yeshua brought forth to us. So he says if you got to drink this cup with him. If you don't drink it, you've gone. You're gone, okay? You're not going to have any salvation. You're just wasting your time if you're not going to do what Yeshua said to do and follow his example. If you do drink it, but you don't get rid of the evil stuff from you right now, and if this is the deciding feast, he says, you're gone. You better work on it. He says it's urgent, very urgent, okay? Because the cup of Yeshua is easy, but we've got to humble ourselves like a little child. And that's what he used. That's the example he used. Remember, he says, in order to make it into the kingdom, you got to be like this little child. You got to be humble like this little child. And he set the example himself. Yeshua, he didn't say anything different. He set the example as a young child, as 12 years old, that this is the way it needs to be. And he says, humble yourself. Follow that example. Be like a little child. And especially if we prepare ourselves for the upcoming feast, because it's such a very important feast. All of Yahweh's feasts are important, but remember, Pentecost, this is the one where Yahweh's law was given to his people, but we're becoming more and more like Yahweh, and his protection comes upon us every time we draw closer into him, and he meets with us on his feast days, because that's the only time, that he comes, as it says, when Solomon set up the temple, before he turned with these wicked women, he set it up to where, Yahweh says, I'm going to be there every Sabbath. I'm going to be there at the feast days and so forth. So that's the blessings that we have.